The letter arrived at the Colorado Territorial Prison for Women on a Tuesday morning in March of 1878, smudged with trail dust and bearing the scent of sagebrush and leather. Matilda Flynn held it in her calloused hands, her dark eyes scanning the careful, slanted handwriting that spelled out her name and prisoner number. She had been behind these stone walls for 8 months, convicted of horse theft she did not commit. And in all that time, not a single soul had written to her except the lawyer who had failed to keep her from this place. The guard who delivered it watched her with suspicious eyes before moving on to continue his rounds. Matilda sat on the edge of her narrow cot in the cramped cell she shared with 2 other women and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words written with obvious effort by someone unaccustomed to formal correspondence. "Miss Flynn," it began, "my name is Graham Hayes. I own a cattle ranch about 20 miles outside Denver, Colorado. I heard about your case from my friend who works at the courthouse, and I have reason to believe you are innocent of the charges brought against you. I have been investigating the matter on my own time, and I think I know who really stole those horses. I am writing to you because I believe in justice, and what happened to you was not justice. I will continue to work on finding evidence to clear your name. I hope this letter brings you some small measure of comfort in knowing that someone believes you. Respectfully, Graham Hayes." Matilda read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling slightly. She had long since stopped hoping for vindication, had resigned herself to serving out her 3-year sentence and then trying to rebuild whatever remained of her life. Her father had died when she was 16, her mother 2 years later, and she had been working as a seamstress in Denver when the marshal had arrested her. The actual thief had been clever, using her name and somehow obtaining papers that seemed to prove she had sold the stolen animals. No one had believed her protests of innocence. She pulled out the stub of a pencil she kept hidden in her mattress and smoothed out a scrap of paper she had saved from a food package. Her reply was brief, her own handwriting neat despite the poor materials. "Mr. Hayes, I received your letter and I thank you for your kindness. I do not know why you would take an interest in my case, but I am grateful. I have told the truth from the beginning, but no one would listen. If you truly believe you can find evidence of my innocence, then I will pray for your success. I have 16 months remaining on my sentence. Thank you for giving me hope. Sincerely, Matilda Flynn." She gave the letter to the guard during mail call, paid the penny postage from her meager earnings doing laundry for the prison, and tried not to let herself hope too much. Graham Hayes received her reply a week later at his ranch, a sprawling property with good grazing land, and a small herd of cattle he had built up over 7 years of hard work. He was 28 years old, tall and broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that was always a bit too long. He had never married, too busy establishing his ranch and too particular to settle for someone he did not truly care for. He lived alone except for 2 hired hands who helped with the cattle and horses. He sat at his rough-hewn kitchen table that evening and read Matilda's letter by lamplight. Her handwriting was elegant, the kind that came from good education, and her words were dignified despite her circumstances. He had first heard about her case 3 months ago when his friend Thomas Crawford, a clerk at the courthouse, had mentioned it over drinks. Thomas had expressed doubt about her guilt, noting inconsistencies in the prosecution's case that the judge had dismissed. Graham had found himself thinking about it, bothered by the idea of an innocent woman locked away. He had started asking questions, quietly investigating on his own. He had discovered that the man who claimed to have purchased the horses from Matilda was a known associate of a horse thief named Jack Donnelly. He had learned that the bill of sale presented as evidence had been written on paper from a batch stolen from a print shop in Colorado Springs. He had tracked down a witness who had seen Donnelly in Denver the day the horses went missing. But none of it was enough yet. He needed solid proof, something that would force the authorities to reopen the case. He wrote back to Matilda that night, telling her about what he had found so far, asking her questions about the day of her arrest, about the people who had testified against her. He told her a bit about himself, about his ranch and his life, feeling somehow that she deserved to know who was trying to help her. Thus began a correspondence that would span the next year and change both their lives forever. The letters went back and forth weekly, sometimes twice a week when the mail ran on time. Graham wrote to Matilda about his progress in the investigation, about the small details of ranch life, about the first wildflowers blooming on the prairie and the new foals born in his stable. Matilda wrote about the monotony of prison life, about the other women she met, about her memories of better times and her dreams for the future. Gradually, without either of them quite realizing it, their letters became less about the investigation and more about themselves, their thoughts and feelings, their hopes and fears. "I look forward to your letters more than I can say," Matilda wrote in June. "They are like windows into a world I fear I may have lost forever. When you describe the sunset over the mountains or the sound of the cattle lowing in the evening, I can almost see it and hear it myself. Thank you for sharing your life with me." Graham found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering what she looked like beyond the basic description Thomas had given him. Dark hair, dark eyes, slender build, about 22 years old. He wondered what her voice sounded like, what her smile might be like. He had never felt this way about someone he had never met, and it confused and excited him in equal measure. By August, he had gathered enough evidence to approach a lawyer he trusted, a man named Richard Morrison, who had a reputation for taking on difficult cases. Morrison reviewed everything Graham had compiled and agreed to petition for a new trial. "This is solid work," Morrison said, spreading the documents across his desk. "The connection between Donnelly and the supposed buyer, the stolen paper, the witness testimony. I think we have a real chance. But I have to warn you, these things take time. The legal system moves slowly, and there are people who will not want to admit they made a mistake in convicting her." "How much time?" Graham asked. "Months at least, maybe longer, and there is no guarantee even with all this evidence." Graham felt frustration rise in his chest but pushed it down. "Do whatever you can. I will pay your fees." "Why are you doing this?" Morrison asked curiously. "You have never even met this woman." Graham considered the question. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because she matters to me." He wrote to Matilda that night, telling her about Morrison, about the petition, about the chance for a new trial. He also wrote something else, something he had been thinking about for weeks. "Matilda, I need to be honest with you. Over these months of correspondence, I have come to care for you deeply. I know it may seem strange, given that we have never met face to face, but I feel I know your heart and your character through your words. You are brave and kind and strong, and you have not let your unjust imprisonment make you bitter. I think about you every day. I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the legal case, I will be there for you. When you walk out of that prison, whether it is tomorrow or at the end of your sentence, I will be waiting at the gate. If you will have me, I would like the chance to court you properly, to see if what I feel in my heart is matched by what we might have together in person. I understand if this is too much, too soon, but I needed you to know. Yours, Graham." He almost did not send it, afraid he was being foolish, afraid she would think him presumptuous or crazy. but in the end he sealed the envelope and gave it to the mail rider. Matilda received the letter on a Thursday afternoon in late August. She read it in the corner of the prison yard during the hour they were allowed outside, tears streaming down her face. The other women left her alone, sensing something significant was happening. She had fallen in love with Graham Hayes through his letters, though she had barely admitted it to herself. She had told herself it was foolish, that he was just a kind man doing a good deed, that she should not read more into it than that. But his words on the page had become the most important thing in her life. She memorized his letters, read them over and over until the paper wore thin. She had begun to dream about what it might be like to meet him, to see his face, to hear his voice speaking the words he wrote. And now he was offering her something she had never dared to hope for, a future. Not just freedom from prison, but a life with someone who cared for her, who believed in her, who saw her as more than just a convicted criminal. She wrote back immediately, her hand shaking so hard she had to steady it with her other hand. Graham, I received your letter and I hardly know how to respond except to say yes, yes to all of it. I have been afraid to let myself care for you too deeply, afraid it was one-sided or foolish. But I cannot deny what is in my heart. Your letters have been my salvation these long months. You have given me hope and joy when I had none. The thought of you waiting for me when I am released fills me with more happiness than I can express. Yes, I would very much like the chance to meet you in person, to see if what we have built through words can become something real and lasting. I am yours if you will have me. Forever yours, Matilda. The next months were agonizing for both of them. Morrison filed the petition for a new trial in September, and the legal process ground forward with excruciating slowness. There were hearings and continuances, objections from the prosecutor, delays for various administrative reasons. Graham attended every hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom, hoping to catch a glimpse of Matilda when they brought her in for the proceedings. The first time he saw her was in late October, when she was brought into the courtroom in chains. She was thinner than he had imagined, her dark hair pulled back severely, her prison dress hanging loose on her frame. But her eyes were bright and intelligent, and when she scanned the courtroom and saw him, recognition flashed across her face. He had sent her a photograph of himself weeks earlier, a formal portrait taken in Denver. Their eyes met across the room and he saw her lips form his name silently. He nodded to her, wishing he could go to her, speak to her, touch her hand. But the guards kept her separate and the hearing began. Matilda could barely focus on the legal proceedings. She had seen Graham, finally seen him in person, and he was even more handsome than his photograph had suggested. There was a strength in his face, a quiet confidence, and the way he looked at her made her heart race. She wanted to run to him, to thank him properly, to feel his arms around her. But she was in chains, treated like a criminal, and all she could do was glance back at him whenever she dared. The hearing ended with the judge agreeing to review Morrison's petition, but making no immediate ruling. Matilda was led out and Graham watched her go, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He went straight to the prison after the hearing and requested a visitor pass. The warden, a hard man named Samuel Briggs, was reluctant at first. "She is a convicted criminal," he said. "We do not encourage visitors except for family." "I am working to prove her innocence," Graham said firmly. "I am part of her legal team and I need to consult with her." It was not entirely true, but Morrison had given him a letter authorizing him to act as an investigator for the case. The warden grudgingly approved a 30-minute visit, supervised by a guard. Matilda was brought to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Her wrists were still shackled, and when she saw Graham standing there, waiting for her, she stopped in the doorway. For a moment, They just looked at each other, taking in the reality of being in the same space after months of letters. "Hello, Matilda," Graham said softly. "Hello, Graham," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The guard pushed her forward and she sat in one chair while Graham took the other. The guard stood by the door watching them. "I wish I could hold your hand," Graham said, looking at her shackles with anger in his eyes. "I wish you could too," Matilda said, "but this is enough. Just seeing you, being near you. It is more than I dared to hope for." They talked quietly for the 30 minutes about the hearing, about Morrison's strategy, about their hope that the judge would grant a new trial. But mostly they just looked at each other, drinking in the sight of the person they had come to love through words alone. "I meant what I said in my letter," Graham told her as the guard signaled that time was up. "I will be at the gate when you walk out of here. Whether it is next week or next year, I will be there." "I believe you," Matilda said, tears glistening in her eyes. "And I will count every day until I can walk into your arms." Winter came to Colorado with bitter cold and heavy snow. The legal proceedings dragged on through November and December. Graham visited Matilda whenever he could, which was not often enough for either of them. Each visit was supervised, brief, limited to that small room with the guard watching. But they treasured every moment, every word, every look. Graham continued his investigation even as Morrison worked on the legal side. He tracked down Jack Donnelly himself, following leads across Colorado and into Wyoming territory. He found witnesses who could place Donnelly in possession of the stolen horses, who had seen him with the forged papers. He gathered statements, affidavits, anything that might help. In January of 1879, Morrison finally got the break they needed. One of Donnelly's associates, a man named Pete Richards, was arrested for a separate crime and decided to make a deal with the prosecutor. He confessed to the horse theft scheme, explaining in detail how Donnelly had framed Matilda Flynn by using her name and forging documents. He provided dates, locations, names of others involved. Morrison brought this new evidence to the judge immediately, along with a motion to vacate Matilda's conviction. The prosecutor, faced with undeniable proof of her innocence and his own office's mistake, did not object. On a cold morning in late January, Matilda Flynn was brought before Judge Harrison Blackwell, the same judge who had sentenced her. The courtroom was packed with people who had heard about the case, including several newspaper reporters. "Miss Flynn," the judge said, his voice grave, "it has come to light that a terrible miscarriage of justice has occurred in your case. Based on new evidence presented by your attorney and the confession of one Pete Richards, it is clear that you were wrongly convicted of a crime you did not commit. I am hereby vacating your conviction and ordering your immediate release. On behalf of this court, I offer you my sincere apologies for the wrong that has been done to you." Matilda stood there, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. Free. She was free. After 11 months in prison, after giving up hope so many times, she was actually free. The courtroom erupted in applause. The guards removed her shackles and Morrison shook her hand, congratulating her. But Matilda was looking around frantically, searching the crowd for one face. Graham was already pushing through the people, making his way to the front of the courtroom. When he reached her, he stopped, suddenly uncertain. They had touched only once before, a brief clasping of hands during one of his visits. Now there were no guards, no restrictions, nothing stopping them. "I told you I would be there when you walked out," Graham said, his voice thick with emotion. "You kept your promise," Matilda said, and then she was in his arms, holding him tight, feeling the solid warmth of him, the strength of his embrace. She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry, not tears of sadness, but of relief and joy and overwhelming gratitude. Graham held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. She was so thin, so fragile feeling, and he wanted to protect her from every bad thing in the world. "You are free," he murmured against her hair. "You are free, and I am here, and everything is going to be all right now." They stood there for a long moment, oblivious to the crowd around them, lost in the reality of finally being together without bars or guards or chains between them. Morrison eventually cleared his throat. "Miss Flynn, there are some papers you need to sign, documentation of your release. And I believe the newspapers would like a statement." Matilda reluctantly pulled back from Graham's embrace but kept hold of his hand. "Can it wait?" she asked. "I just want to leave this place." "Of course," Morrison said kindly. "Come to my office tomorrow, and we will take care of everything then." Graham led Matilda out of the courthouse, down the steps to where his wagon was waiting. He had driven into Denver from his ranch that morning, knowing this might be the day, hoping and praying for this outcome. Matilda stopped on the sidewalk, breathing in the cold January air, looking up at the sky. It was overcast, threatening snow, but to her, it was the most beautiful sky she had ever seen. "Where would you like to go?" Graham asked gently. "I have a room reserved for you at a hotel if you would like to rest, or I can take you anywhere you want." Matilda turned to look at him. "I would like to go to your ranch," she said. "If that is all right, I want to see the place you have written to me about all these months." "I want to see your home." Graham felt his heart swell. "Nothing would make me happier," he said, "but it is a 3-hour drive and you must be exhausted. Are you sure?" "I am sure," Matilda said firmly. "I have spent 11 months in a cage. I want to be out in the open, under the sky, riding across the prairie. Please, Graham, take me home." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. He had brought a thick wool blanket and he wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he took up the reins and guided the horses out of Denver, heading west toward the mountains. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, Matilda drinking in the sight of the open landscape, the snow-covered plains stretching to the distant peaks. Graham glanced at her frequently, still hardly believing she was really here beside him. "Tell me about the ranch," Matilda said eventually. "Tell me everything." So Graham talked, describing the house he had built with his own hands, the barn and corrals, the pastures where the cattle grazed, the spring-fed creek that ran through the property. He told her about his 2 hired hands, Tom and Charlie, good men who helped keep the place running. He told her about his horses, especially his favorite mare, a paint named Sage. "It is not fancy," he said, "just a working ranch, but it is mine, free and clear. I built it from nothing, and I am proud of it." "I am proud of you," Matilda said softly. "You are an amazing man, Graham Hayes. You saved my life." "You saved mine too," Graham said. "I did not even know I was lonely until I started writing to you. You showed me what was missing from my life." The ranch came into view as the sun was beginning to sink toward the western mountains. It was exactly as Graham had described it. A sturdy log house with a wide porch, a large barn, several outbuildings, corrals with horses, and beyond, the rolling pastures. Smoke curled from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows. "It is perfect," Matilda breathed. Tom and Charlie came out of the barn when they heard the wagon, then stopped in surprise when they saw Graham had a woman with him. Graham had told them about Matilda, about the case, but they had not expected her to come to the ranch so soon. "Tom, Charlie, this is Miss Matilda Flynn," Graham said as he helped her down from the wagon. "Matilda, these are my hired hands. They know about your situation, and they are good men who will treat you with respect." Both men removed their hats and greeted her politely. Tom, the older of the two, smiled warmly. "Welcome, Miss Flynn. We are glad to see justice was done." "Thank you," Matilda said. "Please just call me Matilda." Graham led her inside the house, and Matilda looked around with wonder. It was a simple home, but clean and well kept. There was a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, and two doorways that led to bedrooms. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and there were touches that showed Graham's care. A bookshelf with well-worn volumes, a comfortable chair by the fireplace, curtains on the windows. "The bedroom on the right is mine," Graham said. "The one on the left is for you. I built it 2 years ago, thinking I might have guests someday or eventually a family. It has a proper bed and a dresser. I know it is not much, but you are welcome to stay here as long as you like." Matilda turned to him, her eyes shining. "Graham, this is wonderful. This is more than I could have dreamed of, but I do not want to impose on you. You have already done so much for me." "You could never impose," Graham said firmly. "Matilda, I meant what I said in my letters. I care for you deeply. I know we need time to get to know each other in person, to see if what we have through our correspondence translates to real life. But I am hoping it will. I am hoping you will stay, at least for a while. Let me take care of you while you recover your strength. Let me court you properly." Matilda reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "I would like that very much," she said softly. The next weeks were a time of healing and discovery for both of them. Matilda gradually regained her strength, eating good food and sleeping in a real bed for the first time in nearly a year. She helped around the house, cooking and cleaning, finding joy in simple domestic tasks after the prison's harsh routine. She explored the ranch, walking through the pastures, meeting the horses and cattle, breathing in the crisp winter air. Graham courted her with old-fashioned gentleness. He brought her wildflowers he found blooming in sheltered spots. He taught her to ride Sage, the gentle mare who seemed to understand that Matilda needed patience. He talked to her for hours by the fireplace in the evenings, sharing stories of his life, learning about hers. He held her hand when they walked, kissed her cheek when he said good night, but always respected her boundaries, letting her set the pace. Matilda fell more in love with him every day. The man she met in person was exactly the man she had come to know through his letters. Kind, honorable, hardworking, thoughtful. He made her laugh with his dry humor. He listened when she talked about her time in prison, the fear and loneliness she had felt. He held her when she woke from nightmares about being locked up again. In early March, exactly 1 year after his first letter had arrived at the prison, Graham took Matilda on a ride up into the foothills. Spring was beginning to show itself in the greening grass and budding aspens. They stopped at a spot with a beautiful view of the valley below, the ranch visible in the distance. Graham dismounted and helped Matilda down, then took both her hands in his. "Matilda," he said, his voice serious but his eyes warm, "I know it has only been a few weeks since you were released. I know you are still recovering from everything you went through, but I cannot wait any longer to ask you this. I love you. I have loved you since before I ever saw your face, loved you through your words and your strength and your kindness. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Matilda felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Graham, I will marry you. I love you so much. You gave me back my life, and now I want to share that life with you." Graham pulled her into his arms and kissed her, really kissed her for the first time. It was sweet and gentle and full of promise, a kiss that spoke of all the love and longing they had carried for each other through the long months apart. When they finally pulled back, both were breathless and smiling. "I do not have a ring yet," Graham admitted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you said yes before I spent money on something you might not like." Matilda laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I do not need a ring to know this is real. But when you do get one, Anything simple will be perfect. I do not need fancy things, Graham. I just need you. They were married 6 weeks later in April of 1879 in a small church in Denver. Morrison attended as Graham's best man, and one of the women Matilda had befriended in prison, recently released herself, stood up as her maid of honor. Tom and Charlie were there, along with a few other friends Graham had made over the years. It was a small ceremony, but filled with genuine happiness and love. Matilda wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Graham had bought her in town, a simple but elegant design in pale blue. She had regained weight and health over the past weeks, and she glowed with happiness as she stood at the altar beside the man she loved. Graham wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face shining with joy as he spoke his vows. "I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. You are my heart, Matilda, and I will spend every day trying to make you as happy as you have made me." Matilda's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to stand by your side through everything life brings. You saved me when I had lost all hope. You showed me what true love means. I will love you forever, Graham Hayes, with everything I am." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Graham kissed his bride with such tenderness that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Denver, a luxury Graham had insisted on. It was Matilda's first time lying with a man, and Graham was gentle and patient, showing her the physical expression of the love they had built over the past year. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big hotel bed, talking softly in the darkness. "I never thought I could be this happy," Matilda whispered. "After everything that happened, I thought my life was over. But now I have you, and I have a home, and I have a future. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Graham assured her, pulling her closer. "This is real, and it is only the beginning. We have our whole lives ahead of us, Matilda. Our whole lives." They returned to the ranch the next day, and Matilda threw herself into being a rancher's wife with enthusiasm. She expanded the garden, planting vegetables and herbs. She learned to help with the ranch work, becoming skilled at managing the horses and even helping with the cattle during branding season. She made the house truly a home, adding touches of beauty and comfort wherever she could. Graham watched her bloom with deep satisfaction. She had been so thin and fragile when she first came to the ranch, but now she was strong and healthy, her cheeks rosy from the sun and fresh air, her laugh ringing out across the yard. He loved her more every day, loved coming home to find her waiting for him, loved falling asleep beside her each night. In the summer of that first year of marriage, they learned that Matilda was expecting a child. Graham was overjoyed, already imagining a son or daughter running around the ranch. Matilda was nervous but excited, hoping she would be a good mother. "You will be wonderful," Graham assured her, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Our child is lucky to have you." The pregnancy progressed well through the summer and fall. Matilda continued to work around the ranch, though Graham insisted she take it easier as she grew larger. By winter, she was round with child, and they spent the cold evenings by the fire, planning for the baby's arrival, dreaming about their growing family. In February of 1880, 2 years after Graham had first written to her in prison, Matilda went into labor. Graham sent Charlie racing to town for the doctor while he and Tom's wife, Emma, who had come to help, did their best to keep Matilda comfortable. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Graham stayed by Matilda's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her. Finally, as the sun was setting on that February evening, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry, healthy and strong. The doctor placed him in Matilda's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, red-faced baby with tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "He is perfect," she breathed. "He is beautiful," Graham agreed, his own eyes wet. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months, but now, looking at their son, Matilda knew. "William," she said. "William Hayes, after my father." "William," Graham repeated, testing the name. "Will, I like it. William Hayes, welcome to the world." Those first months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Little Will was a good baby, though he kept them up many nights with his crying. Matilda nursed him and sang to him and marveled at every tiny change in him. Graham was a devoted father, holding his son whenever he could, talking to him in a soft voice, already planning for the day he could teach him to ride and work the ranch. As the years passed, the ranch prospered and grew. Graham expanded his herd, bought more land, built a bigger barn. Matilda's garden became famous in the area for its abundance, and she started selling preserves and vegetables in Denver. They were happy, their love deepening with each passing season. In 1882, Matilda gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. She had her mother's dark hair and eyes and her father's easy smile. Will, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they named James. And in 1886, their family was completed with the birth of twin girls, Clara and Rose. The house that had once seemed spacious now rang with the sounds of children playing, laughing, sometimes fighting. Graham built an addition to accommodate the growing family, including a larger kitchen and more bedrooms. The ranch hands, Tom and Charlie, became like uncles to the children, teaching them to ride and rope and work with the animals. Matilda often stood on the porch in the evenings, watching Graham play with their children in the yard, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she had. From the darkness of that prison cell to this abundance of love and family seemed impossible, miraculous. Graham would come up beside her on those evenings, sliding his arm around her waist and pull her close. "What are you thinking about?" he would ask. "How blessed I am," Matilda would reply. "How much I love you, how grateful I am that you wrote that first letter." "Best decision I ever made," Graham would say, kissing her temple. "You are my everything, Matilda. You and our children. You are my whole world." The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and work and family life. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Will became serious and responsible, eager to learn everything about running the ranch. Sarah was artistic and gentle, always drawing or singing. James was adventurous and bold, forever getting into mischief. Clara and Rose, the twins, were inseparable and shared a mischievous streak that kept their parents on their toes. Matilda and Graham faced the challenges of life together: harsh winters, drought years, sickness, accidents. But through it all, their love remained steady and strong. They supported each other, encouraged each other, never forgot what they had overcome to be together. In 1890, when Will was 10 years old, he asked his mother about her time in prison. She had been honest with the children about her past, not wanting them to hear about it from someone else, but she had spared them the worst details. "Why did you go to prison if you did not do anything wrong?" Will asked with the directness of childhood. Matilda sat down with him on the porch steps, looking out at the ranch that was his birthright. "Sometimes, even good people end up in bad situations through no fault of their own," she said carefully. "Someone lied about me, and the authorities believed that person instead of me. It was very unfair and it was very hard, but your father believed in me when no one else did. He worked to prove I was innocent. He saved me, Will. And then he gave me all of this, a family and a home and a life better than I ever dreamed possible. Papa is a hero, Will said with certainty. Yes, he is, Matilda agreed. And I hope you will grow up to be a man like him, strong and kind and willing to stand up for what is right. I will try, Will promised. Graham, who had been standing in the doorway listening, felt his heart clench with love for both his wife and his son. He came out and sat beside them, putting his arms around both. Your mother is the hero, he told Will. She survived something terrible and did not let it make her bitter or angry. She stayed kind and hopeful. That takes real strength. You are both heroes, Will decided, and his parents laughed. As the 19th century drew to a close, Graham and Matilda watched their children grow into young adults. Will took on more and more responsibility at the ranch, clearly preparing to take over someday. Sarah married a schoolteacher from Denver and moved to town but visited often. James talked about becoming a lawman, wanting to ensure justice was served fairly. Clara and Rose were still deciding their futures, but seemed inclined toward running their own business together. In 1895, on their 16th wedding anniversary, Graham took Matilda back to the spot in the foothills where he had proposed. They had snuck away for the afternoon, leaving the children in Tom's capable care. They stood looking out at the view, both of them grayer now, lines on their faces that had not been there 16 years ago. But their hands were clasped together, and their love was as strong as ever. You remember standing here that day, Graham asked, when I asked you to marry me? I remember every moment of it, Matilda said. I remember how nervous you looked and how my heart was racing and how I could not believe this wonderful man wanted to spend his life with me. I was terrified you would say no, Graham admitted. I thought maybe I was rushing things, asking too soon. If you had asked the day I was released, I would have said yes, Matilda told him. I knew I loved you before I ever saw your face, Graham, and I have never regretted saying yes, not for a single moment. Graham turned to her, cupping her face in his calloused hands. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Matilda Hayes. These 16 years with you have been the happiest of my life. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Matilda kissed him, this man who had been her savior, her love, her partner in everything. I love you too, Graham. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for being there at the gate when I walked out. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, looking out at the land they had built their life on, thinking about the family they had created together, grateful for every day they had been given. The years continued to roll forward. The 20th century arrived with fanfare and celebration. The children continued to grow and build their own lives. Will married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property and took over more of the daily operations of the ranch. He and his wife gave Graham and Matilda their first grandchildren, 2 boys who loved spending time with their grandparents, learning the stories of how their grandmother had been wrongly imprisoned and their grandfather had saved her. Sarah and her husband had 3 children and ran a successful school in Denver. James did become a lawman, a marshal known for his fairness and integrity, living out his mother's belief that justice should be served properly. Clara and Rose opened a dress shop together in Colorado Springs, their designs becoming popular throughout the territory. Graham and Matilda slowed down as they aged, letting the younger generation take over more of the work. But they remained active and involved, Graham still riding out to check on the cattle into his 60s, Matilda still maintaining her beloved garden. They celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1904 with a big party that brought together all their children and grandchildren, along with friends from throughout the region. It was a joyful gathering, full of laughter and music and love. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, Graham and Matilda sat on their porch in the rocking chairs they had added years ago. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the night was warm and peaceful. 25 years, Matilda mused. It seems like no time at all, and yet like a lifetime. The best lifetime a man could ask for, Graham said, reaching over to take her hand. You ever think about how different things could have been? Matilda asked. If you had not written that first letter, if you had not believed in me. I try not to, Graham said honestly. It makes me too sad to think about you spending 3 years in that place, coming out with no home, no hope. I prefer to focus on what actually happened. I wrote to you. You wrote back. We fell in love. We built this life together. That is what matters. You are right, Matilda agreed. And I am grateful for every moment, even the hard times, because we faced them together. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently, hands clasped between them. I hope we have many more years together, Matilda said eventually. I hope we get to see our grandchildren grow up, maybe even meet great-grandchildren. I hope so too, Graham said. But whatever time we are given, I am content, because I got to spend it with you. Matilda leaned over and kissed him softly. I love you, Graham Hayes. I love you, Matilda Hayes, Graham replied. From that first letter to this moment and forever after. The stars wheeled overhead as they sat together, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of love and family and purpose. From a prison cell to a front porch, from despair to joy, from strangers connected by letters to partners united in love for a quarter century. In 1908, Graham fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. Despite Matilda's devoted nursing and the doctor's best efforts, he weakened steadily over the course of 2 weeks. Matilda never left his side, holding his hand, talking to him, reminding him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. On a quiet evening in February, with snow falling softly outside and Matilda beside him, Graham Hayes passed away peacefully at the age of 58. Matilda was devastated. The man who had saved her life, who had loved her unconditionally, who had given her everything good in her world, was gone. She wept for days, held by her children and grandchildren, comforted by the community that had watched their love story unfold. They buried Graham on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, Graham Hayes, 1850–1908, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, a man of honor who stood for justice and loved without measure. Matilda visited his grave every day, talking to him, telling him about the children and grandchildren, about the ranch, about her memories. She continued to live in the house they had built together, refusing her children's offers to move in with them. This is where I belong, she told Will firmly. This is where your father and I built our life. I will stay here until I join him. She remained active and engaged with her family, finding joy in her grandchildren and even the great-grandchildren who began to arrive. She told them stories of their grandfather, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been, how he had believed in justice and fairness and love. In 1915, on the anniversary of the day Graham had proposed to her, Matilda rode up to that spot in the foothills one last time. She was 61 years old now, her hair completely gray, her face deeply lined. But her eyes were still bright and intelligent, still the eyes that had looked at Graham across that courtroom so many years ago. She stood at the place where he had asked her to marry him, where they had stood on their 16th anniversary, and she spoke to him as if he could hear her. I miss you every day, my love, she said to the wind. But I am not sad, because we had such a beautiful life together. You kept your promise, Graham. You were there at the gate when I walked out. You gave me a home and a family and more love than I ever thought possible. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for loving me." She stood there for a long time, feeling close to him in this place that held such important memories. Then she rode back down to the ranch, to the house they had filled with love and laughter, to continue the life they had built together. Matilda lived another 12 years, passing away peacefully in her sleep in 1927 at the age of 73. Her children buried her next to Graham on that hillside and added to the headstone, "Matilda Flynn Hayes, 1854–1927, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. A woman of strength who never lost hope." Their great-grandson, who became a writer, would later tell their story to his children and grandchildren, ensuring that the tale of how a cowboy rancher wrote to a woman behind prison walls and promised to be at the gate when she walked was never forgotten. It became part of the family history, a reminder that love can triumph over injustice, that one person's belief in another can change everything, that the most beautiful romances are built on trust and faith, and the courage to reach out to someone in need. The ranch remained in the Hayes family for generations, passed down from parents to children. Each generation told the story of Graham and Matilda, of the letters that built a love strong enough to last beyond death itself. Visitors to the ranch could see the original house, expanded but still standing, and the hillside where two simple headstones marked the resting place of two people who had loved each other completely. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew down from the mountains across the prairie, some people swore they could feel the presence of that love still lingering in the air, a testament to the power of faith, hope, and a promise kept. The end.